So happy Indigenous Peoples Day. Thank you so much for coming to the final event for the Center for Black, Brown, and Queer Studies Cyborg Pedagogies Conference. It's been a fantastic weekend of events. I really appreciate everyone who attended and spoke and dropped in. And before I introduce our wonderful keynote speaker, I want to take a minute to thank the Hewlett Foundation for their generosity. Without their support, spaces like this conference and like the Pedagogy Lab as a whole wouldn't be possible. So I want to recognize them for their ongoing assistance. And now I'd like to introduce Dr. Nicole Truesdell. She's a writer, a facilitator, a coach, a really wonderful mentor, and a mother. She's a trained sociocultural anthropologist and a self-proclaimed recovering academic. Nicole's work is currently focused on bringing the humane back to humanity via connection with the self. And she's working on her first book, which is called Anger, a Memoir, and it explores the relationship between anger, religion, race, and identity, and healing for our collective liberation. Throughout this keynote, please feel free to join the chat and welcome and join me in welcoming Dr. Truesdell as she presents her talk, Rage to Heal: Reflections on the Human as Cyborg.
Thank you. All right, and hello, everybody. Thank you all for being with me today on this Monday afternoon, also Indigenous Peoples Day in the US. But I first want to give a big shout out and thank you to the Center for Black, Brown, and Queer Studies for inviting me to speak with you all today. And I really want to give the biggest and warmest shout out to Dr. Caitlin Dunn, Pedagogies Lab Director at the center, and she's somebody I consider a friend, a colleague, and also our partner in liberation. So it's really wonderful to be able to come back and work with her in this capacity. And I also want to shout out the Pedagogy Lab Fellows, Charlie, Destiny, Angel, David, and Tatiana. I worked with them a little bit this summer. They were amazing. And I saw some of the presentations topics. And so I know that their projects for the open resource were fired today. And I'm really excited that they were able to share that with you all today as well. So today, what we're going to do is we're going to talk about the cyborg via humanity and the humane from the standpoint of our emotions, okay? And so I want to say this, I'm going to invoke an emotion on purpose, but I'm doing with an intention. If you choose not to do the exercise, that is totally okay. You'll still get something out of it if you just kind of sit back and just listen and kind of contemplate and take in. But if you want to lean in and actually do the praxis part of this talk, take your pen and paper that you have with you. If you're on YouTube, you can do the same way, take a pen and paper, have it next to you, and we'll be using that throughout this kind of basically a half-hour talk that I'll be talking with you about this topic, okay? So all I ask is that you give yourself permission to be here with me now in this space, and for how it makes in a way that allows you just to be you in yourself, not in your thoughts, not in your academic, but it's you and yourself, okay? Now let's start. I'm going to invoke the emotion now. So I'm setting the intention. So if you don't want to do it, it's okay if you don't. But I want you to start by taking a time and thinking about a time that you were really upset, like angry, like downright pissed off because you couldn't respond with that anger in time. So essentially a time when you felt like you had to swallow your anger and eat your teeth, okay? So think about that time. You had to swallow your anger and eat your teeth. Now on that sheet of paper, as you're thinking about contemplating this time, I want you to write the words anger on the top of the page in big words, okay? And let me get my timer. And so the first three words that come to mind when you see anger, what are the first three words that come to mind? Write it down, 10 seconds. First three words that come to mind. First three words. All right, stop. Now, what song encompasses that feeling of anger that you thought about when you thought about that story? So what's a song that would encompass that word anger? Write that down. That's song one. So it was after school and my kid wanted a Slurpee from the local 7-Eleven and I needed a bag of ice for an upcoming road trip over Labor Day weekend. As I put the ice in the back seat, watching my kid get in the car, a black F-250 pickup truck pulls up behind my parked car and an older white woman rolls down her window asking if she could talk. Now, knowing I talk to strangers, especially white folks in pickup trucks in the country, I said I wasn't interested, right? But then she said, I want to talk to you about the CRT because I find it a shame and really horrible they are trying to teach it to our kids. Now, I was really not interested. I thought, mind my business and there won't be a problem, I quickly told myself. She don't know what the fuck she's even talking about to begin with, so what's the point? And that was the finale that closed out the situation in my head. But as I closed my back door and looked up, I noticed that said woman also had a phone in her hand and it appeared to be recording. All that lovely talk I had just told myself seconds prior went out that window when I came face to face with my reality. A white woman in a black pickup truck in a white conservative area was blocking my car in a public parking lot with my child in the back, recording me, asking me about some motherfucking critical race theory. That is when I stopped and started feeling. Based on this stark reality in my face, and I did what I knew deep down I should have done the minute she pulled up that raggedy truck behind mine. I cussed her out in that parking lot, letting her know she got the wrong one on the right day since she is talking to a scholar of race and racism who teaches shit a hell of a lot more radical than some watered down privilege walk, CRT, that ain't even being talked about or even taught in these schools to begin with. I ended that her assumptions got her messed up in these streets because her racism just got her looking like a damn fool. Now shaking, literally I was shaking. I get back in the car and I saw my kid in the back seat. Mortified, I start to explain what happened, but before I could even start, they looked me in my face, cracking up and said, "That was awesome, Mom. She won't do that again." Huh, out of the mouths of babes. On the drive home, my body felt like it was literally on fire. That was some racist ass shit was all I kept thinking while I was also trying to tell myself to calm down so I could process and get my kid home. And then Miranda Lampert's Gunpowder and Lead came on my Spotify. Turning it up and listening to the lyrics. Now, side note, I'm not going to inundate y'all with my horrible singing, so I'm going to speak the lyrics, but pretend if you know the song, the lyrics are being sung to you in a lovely on-tune key, right? Into it. I'm going to home, going to load my shotgun, wait by the door and light a cigarette. He wants to fight, well, now he's got one. He ain't seen me crazy yet. He slapped my face and he shook me like a rag doll. Does that sound like a real man? I'm going to show you what a little girls are made of, gunpowder and lead. Like that, I could hear what my anger was telling me. That woman picked a fight and she got one back. It ain't time to play small, pretend as if what is going on is really not. Believe these folks when they tell you who they are and stop swallowing your teeth to make others comfortable, digesting your own rage till it burns you up while they continue to act out. And finally, was I quote unquote wrong? And was there quote unquote a right in this situation? Or are you just tired of folks playing in your face and you're supposed to just take it cuz? See, in that interaction, my anger was not a detriment, but actually an ally, a teacher, a guide, signaling to me what I was trying to suppress, stuff down, trying to confine. See, when we let our anger out, unleash some of the rage within, it's the only way that we can activate what's been long suppressed for way too long, which is actually our full humanity. Because in these rapidly changing digital times, we're going to need to not only look outward towards some future technologies, we're also going to have to look inward into our own humanities to figure out what the way forward actually is. And we do that by tapping back into the things that we have been conditioned to move away from, conditioned to believe, to have to suppress, to confine or bifurcate in order to be whatever the hell you're supposed to be or try to be. We have been conditioned to move away from our own emotions, especially our strongest emotion, that are seen as some sort of high-speed missile that's going to explode if we express it in certain spaces. And the strongest one that we're told to move away from, water down, contain, and professionalize is our anger. It's our rage. And when your oppressor tells you something about you is inherently wrong, you know that is exactly what you need to lean all the way into if you want to resist the impeding tide of conservatism and control that is already here and it's going to keep coming. Draw a line on that page. Let's step into your body. What is the emotion you feel right now? What is the emotion you feel right now? Not what you think, what do you feel? Write it out. It can be the same one you felt, it can be something different. Write that emotion out. Now, what is the song that you would attach to that emotion that you just have now processing my introduction? The emotion that you feel, and what is the song? Here we go. Now, what the hell does that have to do with the topic of this conference being focused on cyborg pedagogies, right? Well, I say all of this because this human is a cyborg, just not fully activated right now. And our most valuable technologies lie dormant, ready to be awakened. Now, throughout this conference, we've been asked to think and talk about cyborg pedagogies and what we will do going forward in terms of our teaching, research, organizing, activism, and really shit just living, right? In these technologically advanced racist times to hopefully mitigate harm and adapt as needed. Now, for me, this means we have to start to think and talk about the human, because the human is a core part of the actual cyborg. The embodiment of the lineages for memories of bloodlines that span across time and space, housed in a vessel created to live in this material plane. And the human is complex and messy. It's a human is complex and messy as being, y'all, that's been reduced to a small shell of itself due to the colonial project of whiteness. Now, what Sylvia Winters calls biological man, man 2, coming after man 1, as European monarchs made moves to replace the church, Pope, God with themselves here on earth. A few short centuries later, those monarchs were replaced by the scientists, academics, explorers, quote unquote, rational white men, who wanted their time in the spotlight as the originators of man. And of course, that image looks like its creators, white men. Now, side note, that is a really short blurb of a long ass complicated body of literature. So if you want to know more about Sylvia Winters and the idea of biological man, please hop into Winters and Sylvia Winters' work. I'm just giving you a Cliff Notes 2-sentence version so we can get into what I'm trying to talk about. Okay, so I want to make sure that's clear. So she's saying a lot more there, but the key thing is, if we look to who created the idea of man, look to its creators, and who creates always creates in the image of themselves. So this reduction of the full scope and range of humanity to a small, watered down, arrogant white version of man is what our problem is. Because to maintain that version of humanity as the version means so many of us have to be small. We have to be shallow. We have to be shallow, right? Outside of intimate spaces. And even there, we're unsure how deep we can actually go because we have been hiding in ourselves, hiding from ourselves, and inadvertently limiting our own technologies within. We are disciplined into conformity from the minute we walk out of the womb, right? Starting with the birth certificate that defines our boundaries, name, race, gender, weight, whatever else is on there now, and then institutionalized by education until we're sorted into further categories or boxes that put us in specific places and spaces. Now, if you make it into this certain categorization, you are then professionalized, right? And if we quote unquote make it and reap the rewards of being in spaces that literally make us sick from overwork and underpay, and then we end up using that money that we don't have left over to numb ourselves more or to fix ourselves enough to keep doing it once more, thinking that this time it'll be different. But my question is how? It reminds me of the lyrics from Mr. Probst praying to a God. She's praying to a God that won't talk back. Her faith is dying, tears are sighing, she's going off track. Keep praying to a God who won't talk back, down on her knees, praying to a God who won't talk back. See, I'm tired of trying to survive in a society that keeps playing in our faces. Last summer solidified that. People in the streets to protest state-sanctioned violence being met by nothing but state-sanctioned violence. Protest, but not that way. Speak on oppression, but not that loud. Enact change, but not like that. You see how anytime we deploy our technologies, those in power ensure we get put right back into an even smaller box while pretending to make some changes in the future. We're never allowed to be present in these interactions because it's always a past remembering for a future yet to be materialized for us. So my faith died in the system a while ago. I believe them when they say they aren't going to save us, but they keep taking from us. And not just our money, our time, our joy, our freedom, even our breath. And by they, I mean those in power, those committed to upholding hegemonic oppressive power, those committed to upholding power by upholding biological man as the only form of the human. And when we look around and think about they in the room, it's institutions of higher education that are some of the main culprits of this upholding of man as human. Because we're disciplined even more than by the disciplines that tell us to split up everything into categories that can hopefully maybe be interdisciplinary in nature, but not really, right? Because you still got to situate yourself in somebody's literature or methods or citations or ego. And in this disciplining, we are learning to value our minds over everything else. So when something happens to you that elicits a strong emotion first, like having to work in a racist or sexist or transphobic, homophobic, oppressive space every day, and someone finally says or does something that sets you off, you then become the problem because your emotion was the problem, instead of addressing the actual problem itself. And I want you to think about this, y'all. Anytime you felt like you wanted to say something and all of a sudden you were the problem, but were you the problem? Was your emotion expressing itself the problem in a space? I wanted to talk about that versus the actual issue at hand. So then you learn you are disciplined to stuffing those truths, those strong emotions down. What you are then learned to do is to really to stuff down your own truth. So you learn over time to swallow your teeth some more, being told to be the bigger person or don't let it phase you because you know how they are. You go to conferences and retreats where you learn mindfulness and learn the tricks to how to get tenure and not lose your soul. Many times it boils down to becoming part robot, devoid of feelings and emotions outside of the one or two, so you can quote unquote make it like Chad over there did, only doing a quarter of the work you had to do just to walk in the damn door, and he gets to be his whole ass self while you swallow yourself some more, right? Praying to a God that won't talk back because that God is whiteness and it cares about nothing but itself, if even that. Consuming everything and everyone in its wake until it only has itself to consume. And see, whiteness maintains itself actually through the same emotion we are told to suppress, which is anger. White rage, as Carol Anderson has written on, is real and it consumes everything it touches because it's immature, not fully grown, yet trying to act grown. In charge, but don't know what to do with the power except replicate what it saw its daddy do. And he doing the same thing, looking at what his daddy did, and so forth back through time to the moment when man was born in the image of its creator. White men looking to grab power and not knowing really what to do with it, so it just destroys everything it touches. Disciplines have disciplined us so well, they have distorted and bifurcated our understandings of human and humanity. As Linda Twally Smith has shown us, science, Western science, alongside its cousins, philosophy and anthropology, right, can be looked to for its disembodiment of humanity as they each carved out their own niche and importance in the emergent nation-making projects being done via the settler colonialism and imperialism. So it's being beholden to a success, y'all. So disciplines were created to create the nation state and legitimize it. The nation state was there to legitimize disciplines. It's this circular logic that they actually reproduce one another over time. Or another way to think about it, it was a backdoor deal mixed with a Ponzi scheme like the Moulin Rouge fashion that took over 200 years to unravel, right? The emperor has no clothes or money or plan or anything going to do. So why do you think they were so mad when those statues came down, buildings changed names, and anti-racism as a concept busted out to the national main stage last year, right? With fewer altars to worship at, fewer names to call down in remembrance, what does the state actually have to draw upon to continue in its exploitation and subjugation of us all? Draw a line. Let's check in. How do you feel now? What's your body feeling? What are you feeling? Check into your body and what is the one word that expresses that feeling that you're feeling now? And when you have that word, what's the song that embodies that feeling? And if it's the same feeling over and over, it's okay. There's more than one song that can embody that same emotion too. So in the words of Solange, right? You got a lot to be mad about. You got the light, count all the joy. You got the right to be mad. But when you carry it alone, you find it only getting in the way. They say you got to let it go. Let it go, let it go, let it go. But do we got to let our anger go? Because whiteness is showing us exactly what it does when it's mad and can't get its way. It shifts the floor once more, right? So now the floor is shifting once again, as states are just making it illegal to teach anything about the history of this nation. Just look to the legislation that's trying to be passed right now in Wisconsin and Florida, right? They got a whole bunch of words that you cannot say that are banned in public education. And the list of banned words and concepts that cannot be taught in these schools reads like any syllabus I and probably most of you have ever taught, right? If I literally can't say racist, white supremacy, structural racism, institutional racism, I can't even say race, and I'm a race scholar, then I can't literally do my job, right? But we are focused on trying to actually educate the generations of this nation. And the nation is telling us that that is not our job and they don't want us to do it. So the floor keeps moving. We got to start believing that no matter what we try to do to fit inside this system, to work with this system, the system was made for man and not for human. So I say, let us go full cyborg by going fully human and letting the rage out, letting it be our guide. Because it is in the rage, the righteous anger, that we get to the truth, because we have been burned through all the bullshit. Whiteness has its own technologies, right? But so do we. And our emotions are part of our technology. Therefore, anger is our technology. And we know how to deploy it in ways that are regenerative and not destructive, when we can actually tap into ourselves. Don't be afraid of the fire. Fire does burn, but when it's burned correctly and it's burned with intentionality and knows what it's doing, it scorches so that it can replenish and grow something more and grow something more sustainable. And when we believe ourselves, our experiences, our bodies, and our ancestral memories, we then realize that we have a right to be mad. And it's our anger that can help set us free. Or as Solange says, I ran into this girl, she says, why you always blaming? Why you can't just face it? Why you always gotta be so mad? I got a lot to be mad about. And we do got a lot to be mad about, y'all. And that's okay, because the humans are cyborg, and we've always been, just now an unactivated one that is being called to activate based upon the reality in which we are in. Do we believe the reality we are in? And it's our ability to fully feel and articulate the emotions we have, to know our experiences are real, and then act accordingly, to feel our anger and know that is the fuel that can help us out of the shackles placed upon ourselves and our humanity, right? The humans are cyborg, and our technologies are not just what we can create, but also what is in us that scares the absolute shit out of those in power. And it's our rage that lets us know that there has to be another way, that there has to be a different way, because there is no way to actually live. So I say, if you want to live and define that living in ways that is relational and sustainable and communal, we got to stop letting whiteness define our terms, and then stop arguing with whiteness when it tells us we are wrong. Because Toni Morrison said, quote, the very serious function of racism is distraction. It keeps you from doing your work. It keeps you explaining over and over your reason for being. Someone said you have no language, and you spend 20 years proving that you do. Someone says your head ain't shaped properly, so you have scientists working on that fact that it is. Someone says you have no art, so you dredge that up. Someone said you have no kingdom, so you dredge that up. None of it's necessary. There will always be one more thing. So you are not wrong. Your experiences are not wrong. Put down the need to use the tools of the master, its data, its numbers, its theories, its criteria, rubrics, methodologies, its disciplines, to justify your experience of working and living in an oppressive state, and believe your experiences are the data that justify your anger and rage, because you already know the theory, you're already here, and you've been putting it into practice in their spaces, right? So now let's put it together and embody that praxis for you in your space and in your own body. Draw a line. Let's check in with yourself. How do you feel? How do you feel? How's your body feeling? One word to describe that. And then, as always, what's the song that would embody that emotion now that you checked into your body? That is now your song 4. Now, in a world that has told us that we are our minds, and therefore our minds are who we are, we have lost the ability to truly know our own humanity, since our humanity is tied to our ability to both think and feel. And between the thinking and feeling is what I call the knowing. Now, our emotions are the technologies that we can deploy for our liberation. We just can't be afraid of them or have them take us over. We have to see them as a companion, a teacher, a guide, showing us the right directions for us individually, right? So we know how to come together collectively. Our emotions are what help us get to our actual knowing. Again, between the thinking and the feeling, there's a knowing. We're trying to get to this knowing. Or as Duck Sauce says, it's up to you what you do with your life. You have just one, so do what's right now. Somebody asked me. And people always ask me, what do I supposed to do? People come to me and ask me, should give them permission to leave whatever they're in, the academy, their career, whatever it is. And my first response always is, are you asking me permission to leave? And if so, I can't give that to you, but I can give you permission to give yourself permission to tell yourself your own truth. And when you are lost as to what your truth is, your real truth, that is when our emotions, especially anger, become a friend, helping us to uncover what that actual truth is. And when we allow anger to have a seat at the table, we allow our humanity to come forth to the surface, transmuting that energy into creative pursuits focused on living instead of surviving in an oppressive capitalist system is how we unlock the technologies already within us. This is what I call a human pedagogy. And I'm interested in the project of the human and how to bring the humane back to humanity via developing a different relationship with ourselves, one another, our ancestors, in the land around us. And I can say now that I'm very weary of moving away from the human when we have not fully actualized or understood what the human is. Instead, only seeing it filtered through a racial capitalist lens that is so reductive in nature, we can only see ourselves as production machines and not actually whole ass human beings. And yes, that is the doing of structures and oppressive systems. And yes, we can take this stuff back and remake it and remix it. So take back your humanity by first sitting in your own. Have a conversation with yourself via your anger. And let me tell you, for those of you who have silenced yourself throughout your lives, for one reason or another, your anger is knocking at the door, asking to have a conversation with you, trying to show you the ways that you don't have to keep eating your teeth and swallowing your voice. Now, I say this because for years, y'all, I did it for others. I was able to do it for others. I saw someone being suppressed, oppressed, reduced in size. I would stand my full 6'3" frame up in righteous protest. But I realized I found I was less fierce when it came to myself. The roar dwindled to a whisper because I told myself it wasn't about me. It was about others. It was about the cause, always about something or someone else, always about fixing a system that I didn't and we didn't actually mess up or even create. But if it's never about me, if I can always dismiss my own experiences and wants and needs as a human, then so can others. And this is the insidious nature of the dehumanizing project. We learn to do it to ourselves so young and so stealthily that when we are faced with our own humanity, sickness, grief, joy, happiness, we turn away from it, not trusting it. Think about it, y'all. Think about how much do you actually trust your own humanity? When your body's telling you you're sick and you need to take a rest, you do it or you keep pushing on saying, no, I can do it. When something is so sad and you're grieving, do you tell yourself, like, I can grieve for this amount of time, I'm going to move on? Hell, when you're so happy and joyful and have all this joy and beauty coming in, you don't trust it because you're like, well, do I deserve it? All of those things make you unsure and untrusting. So unsure of what to do with it because that human, that fuller version of ourselves may have us move differently when we actually sit in ourselves. So when we actually sit in these emotions, they may ask us some questions that we don't really want or know how to face yet. And our emotions, our anger and our rage will have us confront some stark truths that fly in the face of being right. I don't want to be right if that rightness still keeps me small, trapped, confined, and oppressed. We come back to self as a way to come back to the human and humanity. We reclaim it from whiteness and its destructive path. We do it by feeling the rage and anger and letting it lead us to paths that are for us and not for the state, not for institutions committed to upholding this oppressive state. It is what can ignite the cyborg within that then can have us envision, see, and create and repurpose external technologies for more sustainable and humane and communal goals, right? We don't want a bunch of unknowing people creating these technologies that may actually be doing the same oppressive things that we're, again, trying to fight against. I refuse to give up humanity to capitalist whiteness and patriarchy that has reduced us to a narrative, small version of ourselves. Instead, I say the way we move forward is to move within, internally to those spaces and places we were told to close off in order to be successful, professional, or whatever. What would it mean to fully own and listen to your own emotions, especially the ones that we are told that are unprofessional or inappropriate, like anger and rage? What would it mean to be able to show up whole in almost any setting? The idea of the cyborg is intriguing for many as it lures us into imagining to take us beyond the human into other types of life. Yet have we fully explored the possibilities of the human in this life, of this life? That is the question, the project I personally am interested in as we work towards more liberatory futures in the present. In the present is the key. I'm not trying to live in the future, I'm living right now, right? And it's a mixed methodology, a pedagogy of the human, a pedagogy of the self, of self-study that requires all senses are active and activated so one can embody the knowledges that can be transmuted for more creative desires, for more humane play. So right now, I'm purposely playing with the idea of work and saying that if we tap into our humanity, we can tap out of the worker mentality of man and tap into the creative potential of the human. And play is actually work, not this shit we're put into 9 to 5 every day. But the system we're fighting against is the same one we are creating. We don't take the time to ask ourselves who we are and why do we do what we do? Essentially, why do you stay? If not, you may end up in professions like teaching that you aren't really sure you like if you like to do it, but you are doing it because you were told you're smart and you can read and write well, so you should be an academic. But without interrogation, you end up reproducing harmful norms because you believe you're doing it better or more critically, especially if you had a really traumatic time in the academy, right? We think we're doing it better, but when we move ourselves from ourselves and we're reproducing it thinking we're doing it more critically or more better, are we actually doing that, right? Then you say you want to push back against the oppression, but you're so caught up in it, you can't separate what your thoughts, ideas, wants, and needs are from what is theirs, right? The institutions, the disciplines, the fields. And that's just what hegemony wants. And that's exactly how hegemony operates. And it's how it reproduces itself over and over and over again. So see, if we activate all these theories we love to cite when talking about revolutionary action, then change can happen. But how many actually want that? And I ask that question with the utmost love and compassion, right? Because you don't know what you don't know. And really, self-knowing is scary because you got to take responsibility for the decisions you make. Self-knowing is terrifying because you have to make decisions that may go against the grain. Self-knowing is downright fucking horrifying because it will make you feel emotions you've hidden from, face truths you've shielded away from, and the next thing you know, you'll be moving differently and taking up space you never thought you should or could, as you should, because this is how you learn how to play. This is how you really learn how to live. But does critique get in the way of you living? And as academics in training, critique is what we have learned and our bread and butter. But does it get in the way of you living? Now that's a deep question because then you have to get clear about what living is. And then are you doing that or living in the space of the critique that keeps you small, bounded, emotionally stunted into a few predetermined ways that you should be to make them more comfortable? Don't let critique stop you from actually living. And I want y'all to contemplate this. Emotional technologies, once deployed, help us navigate this terrain, helping us get clear about what our questions are for us and what questions are for us to answer, and which questions and things are not for us to pick up and answer. Draw a line. Let's check in. How are you feeling right now? How does your body feel right now? What are you feeling? What's the one word? Write that down. And then write an accompanying song to that. That's your song 5. All right, we're heading to the home stretch. Now I want to end this by saying this is not linear. This is not a linear path, right? We got to disrupt time here too, y'all. We're doing all kinds of disruptions. Please do not think that once you've had a conversation with your anger, that that's the work and you'll know exactly what to do next. This is a messy exercise, self-knowing. Knowing self, therefore knowing the human and humanity via our emotions in order to activate the cyborg within, to activate the technologies at our disposal that will help us know the external technologies we are creating are actually upholding and not destroying life, right? We have to disrupt our understandings and sense of time, releasing the idea we can control it and therefore know what time is supposed to bring us. Because that supposed to is still rooted in the not you, the conditioned you, the dehumanized you. Coming back to your humanity means you understand this shit is messy and again, not linear. I'm gonna say it over and over again, it's not linear. And I say this because this really came to me this weekend as I was contemplating this talk literally and my introduction narrative, that story I told you about that Miss CRT. Now, I was surprised as I wrote it out that I am now just realizing that I would vocalize my righteous anger for another, but still had some hesitations when it was just for me. Then by the campfire under the stars with my husband trying to get this damn fire lit because the wood was wet and it's been 3 hours of fanning and burning. And I'm sitting here trying to figure out what's going on. I was taken back as my Spotify went on to the album Rudimental's Toast to a Difference. It took me back 2 years ago when I was forced to face my own humanity. my own emotions, and my own truths that contradicted all of the rights I had rooted myself in. And as the whole album continued, because again, with 3 hours trying to kind of get this wet fire to actually burn, it burned, y'all, it burned, but it took 3 hours, right? As the song continued, I realized the whole album was one whole album dedicated to the self, to the soul, the uncovering of self by walking through every emotion one could have until all you were left was you. Listening to the drum and bass influenced album, I could see how much I had grown into my own humanity with more to go. 2 years later, I've uncovered more technologies within. The first was me just feeling, period. Then all the emotions came out, wanting to have a conversation. Now, some stayed for a short amount of time and others staying left. And I need some of them to go, but they got some work to do, I guess, still, right? But these technologies are letting me see new and more possibilities about what is actually for me, not what others told me that was supposed to be for me. And see that word supposed to come back. Again, like a shadow, looking for a host and a home to attach itself to. When you untach, when you can untach when you realize technologies are there, waiting for you to uncover, discover, and deploy them. Draw a line. Last check-in. What are you feeling now in your body? Write that word down. And then the accompanying song to it as well. Now, I didn't have you just do a bunch of songs and feelings just for the hell of it, right? This is one way that you can actually start to unlock some of the emotion in you. And I purposely used anger because I'm working with anger and anger is part of the talk, right? So what I want you to do is you should have, I think, 5 to 6 songs. I kind of got lost in my own accounting when I was writing the talk. 5 or 6 songs. I want you to add until you have 10 songs minimum in the playlist based upon that initial emotion of anger, right? You're going to have at least 10 songs on there. And I do this, you start to unlock, you can start to unlock the emotion by unlocking your actual body and having a conversation with it. And I find you can have a conversation with your body and that emotion when you actually move the body. And music can become a medium in which to do that. So your body literally is the physical plane, it is earth. Music with the lyrics is actually air. And what you are trying to do is have it flow. So you let the water in you flow and you can ignite that spark fire in you so that you can start to figure out your wholeness and have an understanding of where the emotions are coming from and what is it that the anger, as the first emotion you're focusing on, is actually trying to tell you. So if you do this exercise, have the playlist down. And take a time that you know you have for yourself. Don't have no distractions. Don't be on your computers, academics. Don't be trying to write no article or edit somebody's paper. This is a time for you. There is no work being done. You are the work, okay? If you do this 10 songs at least, you need a light, a tea light, and you need a cup of water because you need fire and water. Again, all the elements. We're going to make a balance. Your body is earth right now. You have a tea light for fire, the cup of water because it's water, and the music is air. And what you're going to do is you are going to listen to that whole playlist, at least 10 songs deep, and you are going to move your body as many way you can. If you can only sit in the chair, if you can't physically, you have mobility issues, you can, whatever you can move, but you're going to allow the music to flow through you. After the 10 songs minimum, you will then journal and answer 3 questions in this order. What do you feel? What do you think? And then what do you see? Feel, think, and see. All right. That was one beginning, a way for you to start to delve into your own emotion of anger, figuring out what anger is trying to tell you, trying to teach you, trying to unveil to you. And that for me is the beginning of you embodying what I call a pedagogy of the human by trying to have yourself come back to yourself via your emotions. All right. And that is where I will leave you all there. I hope, I'm not gonna lie, y'all, I was nervous trying to do this, but I'm happy you got it done. So I'm gonna turn it over to Caitlin. What are we doing next, Caitlin? And thank you all for listening.